So I'm going to go ahead and set system access now. Looks like there are 9 users signed in. I guess just to show you, I'll put notification first, and I'll just go ahead and say save. So now go ahead and just navigate somewhere else. Just click on a different tab or do anything like that, and you guys will end up getting a pop-up with that notification message on it, notifying you what's going to happen. I just chose the default one that was already in there. Also, you'll see that the Cartograph yellow border up there in the top left corner, if you actually hover over that or select it, you will actually get the message on your screen as well. So when it is in notification mode, that Cartograph emblem will be bordered with yellow, and if you select it, you'll actually get the notification here. If you click, you haven't got it at all. Is your logo yellow?
Oh, click the triangle. Oh. Yeah, you gotta click on the triangle, the triangular yellow.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, to turn yellow. Yeah.
Yep, okay. And then afterwards, once the time has been reached, I'm going to go in and lock the system. There are 11 people in it. When I say save, it's going to say, hey, just a heads up, remember to set it to full access when you're done. I'm going to go ahead and say lock for maintenance, and it should kick everybody out of the site. It'll tell you who's actually locked the system as well on the sign-in screen, so it'll tell you, hey, Nick is the one that locked it, you're going to have to go to him. So even if I sign out right now, I could sign back in with Nick's account. In order to unlock it, he's the only one that can sign in and out of the system once it's locked. So whoever locks it has the power to go in and out, and they're the ones that have to put it as full access.
So this is a new addition, or change or anything? I would just, you were like, I want to change the system probably twice since this has been put in effect. The second time, I almost forgot to unlock it, so I just like, all right, I'm done, publish, close browser, whatever else. Then like an hour later, it's like 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, I'm like, oh shit, I need to unlock the system. And because otherwise I
couldn't get it.
I would imagine getting several nasty grams, first thing in the morning. So yeah, this is a thing. This is a change, and I didn't do it all right away, but it's very important. Make sure you unlock the system.
Yep. Once it is locked, it's not going to matter for anyone besides the person that locked it, but the top left Cartograph logo is now red. It is not yellow anymore. That means it's locked for maintenance, but obviously no one else can see it because no one else can get into the system, right? Now that I do have it locked, though, I can make any type of database structure changes I want. So let's go ahead and go into the task record set again and just create something. So inside tasks, I have to select the record set, and you can see I get my second column pulled up over here. I don't have to be anywhere specific, but let's say, hey, I wanted to go in and create a new field for tasks. I'll go ahead and say create up in the top, and I have multiple options. So once again, we kind of talked about a couple, right? Field is pretty basic. We know what a library is, and if you don't, library is just have a collection. So if you have departments as a library, you can have a library departments that shows public works, roads, transportation, all that type of stuff that kind of go on. So that way you have a drop down instead of just a manual text field you have to enter. Record set, a lot of times is child record set. So you guys have a lot of child record sets in your guys' system already, like tracking. You guys had element inside of your inspections. You had a couple of things for like estimated cost and such. So all of those things are child record sets that you guys have created. And what they did there was they selected what they wanted and then came in and said record set. It'll actually create the child record set to where you want. Big keynote is you want to always make sure you select where you're trying to put it, right? If I didn't select tasks, I would never be able to create anything over here. So I had to make sure I selected tasks first, get my second column to populate, and then now I can come in and tell it what I want to create. I just want to create a basic field. Oh, sorry, relationship was the last thing. We can certainly do this. What that does a lot of times, and what it's used for, is for asset relationships. So if you guys are adding new assets or want more relationships involved, relationships what they have to do is either they're linked or container component relationships. A linked one would be something like a support and a sign, or maybe a guardrail and a piece of pavement, where they're saying, hey, we're buddies, right? We connect to each other. We belong to the same area, like how a sign is hanging off a support, right? But the OCI, which if you don't know, overall condition index, doesn't affect one another, right? I don't care if my sign is looking terrible, if my support's good. I don't need to replace the support. I just need to replace the sign, right? A container component is more of like parks and facilities and things like that, where you have things inside of it that can have effect on the OCI. So facility is a polygon, and inside of it, it has multiple things like HVAC units, fire detection, all those types of things that have effect on the overall rating of the facility, right? So as a facility, if your HVAC unit's shot, your facility's kind of going down, right? You need to have that HVAC unit up, so that can actually affect the OCI. So creating relationships through Structure Manager comes through here in this process. Back to what we're doing though, is just create a basic field. So inside of tasks, I selected it, I hit create, I'll say field. It's going to say what type of field type are you trying to create, and I can use the drop down. So there's multiple types of field types we can use. Checkbox, right, on or off. The currency, date and time, integer, lookup, number, quantity, text, and then just basic time. Okay. So whatever you guys decide you are going to want to end up using for this, go ahead and pick it. Something to be aware about is you cannot change it once you create it, right? So if I choose I want to make it text, and then afterwards I'm like, ah, crap, I should have made it a number field, you're going to have to delete it and re-add it. There's no changing what type of field it is. It's database structure, right? So you're not going to be able just to go in and change those things. You would have to delete the field out and then recreate it. So you want to make sure that you're picking what you have correctly the first time. For this scenario, I'm just going to go ahead and say we're creating a basic text field. So I'll go ahead and just leave it as text, and I can say done. Okay. There are multiple fields you have to fill out when you want to create structure. The one that is pretty much the only one you certainly have to make is the field name, right? So what do you want to call it? That's the field name column. Field name is what you guys see on the front end. When you guys are actually in a layout, right? You're on your detail screen or you're on your column selector, whatever that field is called, that is actually the field name. So you're allowed spaces, you can name it whatever you want. So if I call this, training field example as a text field, I also have the ID and column name to populate. However, if I just hit tab, it'll automatically populate those things for me. What it does is it pretty much just takes out the spaces and populates all the required fields that I need. So ID and column name, these are database driven things that we have here. So nothing crazy here. Once you create it, you won't be able to change those. Those are going to become not editable by you. You can always come back and change the field name. So if you guys are seeing some things on your guys' layouts and you want to change the wording of it, right? Maybe you don't want it to be called A, you want it to be called B because that makes more sense to you. Like they said, if you don't have that admin account access to get into Structure Manager, let them know the field name is always editable, so they can always go in and change what that is so that you guys can actually see what you are actually wanting, right? If it makes more sense for you to be labeled something different.
I'll throw out an example that whenever I was first starting out this database, I kept on being told that, from Cartograph personnel, it's like, oh, there's streets, you can't change the name of streets. We call things out by streets, whatever else. And we kept saying, I don't care what you guys call it or anything. Around here, we call out by the route. And it was like 6 months later we finally realized, it's like, oh, just change the name. And yeah, the structure is behind it. It's still called streets. But, our common knowledge, it's called routes. Or we also changed the asset name to biospheres. Or there was something in there where there's a lot of confusion between these storm channels and everything else. We changed the structure, still reference in here. The ID is still like whatever used to be storm channels, but the thing everybody sees is biospheres. So it's powerful, and it's you're not really changing the real structure, but you're just changing what everybody really sees. So it's very helpful. And you just need to know that because, like I said, I want to touch on it again. When you get into reporting, you're still going to be looking for why can't I find routes? It's like, oh, because it's streets. So that's where you have something you have to jump in here just to see what that connection, really is. This is the best place to find it.
Depending on, you'll always have field name, ID, and column. That's always going to be things that have to have populated. Once again, you fill out the field name, you hit tab, it'll fill out the rest for you, so no worries. But after that, everything kind of changes based on what the data type is, right? So if it's text, it's going to ask you, hey, what's the maximum number of characters it can have? So if you have a limit, or if it's going to be unlimited text, you can certainly select unlimited. If it's a lookup field, you're going to have to say tie it to a library, right? So if it's a lookup field, it has to look to a library to get its values. So you have to be able to tie it to the library. So on and so forth. Date and time are going to have different ones as well. Checkbox doesn't really have anything because it's a yes or no value, right? It's a checkbox on and off. So nothing, but you guys will see some differences in here when it comes to that. For text, another thing is like auto numbering and such. You can always go through here and say if it's an auto number, you can click on auto number and say what it is. You can give it a prefix, so it always prefixes the auto number with something. So every year, if you want to come in and you prefix everything with the year value, you can say it's 19- as the prefix, and then have the increment going. And then once the new year starts, you can come in here and you can put 20- and then have that continue to prefix that way as well. And then you have your value required down here at the bottom. You do have some other things like validation rule and validation text. These are not used very often. These are types of things like inside of stop date cannot be less than start date, right? So you can't have an actual start date that is after the stop date. That can't happen. So that would be like a validation rule. Things along those lines. A lot of times these are actually handled inside of Automation Manager now instead of Structure Manager, just because it's a lot more user friendly, a lot easier to build, a lot easier to troubleshoot for people when they actually come down to these validation rules. Once you're done filling out everything you need to, based on what type it is, you can go ahead and hit save. And it'll create the field for you. And it'll just drop it in the alphabetical order of where it belongs in the listing. Now you can see I have training field example, and I have all those options. And those are the formats for it. Now that I have this selected, I also have an actions of delete. That is the only action you will ever get. There's not going to be anything else that pops under that menu. It's always just going to be the delete functionality. So no matter what you're on, you're going to get the actions delete option there. Maybe I don't want this field. It was a bad field. Maybe I need to create it as a different type. Something along those lines. You certainly can delete it. The reason that this tool is mainly pretty limited off by any type of organization is when you delete something, you're also getting rid of all the data. There's no going back, right? Unless you restore the database to a backwards in time. So if I go in here and I delete something that you guys need, like total estimated cost, and I delete that out of tasks, every total estimated cost value is now gone, right? The whole field is gone. So you're never getting that back. So that's the kind of one of the powers that come from Structure Manager is our standard fields, our default fields that come with assets and such, they're not going to be able to be deleted. They're going to be very hard to delete. But anything that you guys have custom-wise can potentially be deleted fairly simple by saying actions delete if the admin user using it doesn't double check to make sure that that's really the field that you want to get rid of. So kind of one of the things why it's super limited. But I can always come up and say actions delete for training field example. Since that is selected, once again it's going to give me a warning saying, hey, are you sure the training field example field is going to be permanently removed? So that's all the data and everything. If I say continue delete, it'll go ahead and wipe it out. Since I did that, I am going to go ahead and run a publish on it just to kind of show you guys what that's like. What the publish does is I'm currently making a database structure changes. So while I'm doing this, I'm actually making the changes to the database. So if I say, oh, I didn't mean to delete it, and I go back, it's too late. You already hit delete, the database structure has already taken place. Okay. What the publish actually does when I hit publish, actually configures the website itself and the database to be on the same page as far as layouts, right, and everything like that. So the database sees, or the website sees exactly what the database structure is. So it's normalizing the two together. And so that's why when people were in the system and why we created the lock is it was trying to see who, it took the URL, took the website, and people were using it, and it caused issues. So now, during this process, we just kick everybody out. It can take some time based on the size of the database and everything like that. So I'll go ahead and run this through to make sure everything's okay. But pretty much it'll run through, it'll update the last published time up here in the top right hand corner, and then you'll be good to go. If there are any problems with the publish, it will error out on you. Depending on what the error was will depend on what shows up on the screen. Then we have an error log and troubleshooting skills. And obviously we always have a support team available, so if you guys do have any published problems and you guys don't know what it is off the top of your head, call support. They're happy to help troubleshoot with you there. Some other uses of Structure Manager have kind of already been said. A big one that I think almost everyone does use is when it comes to reports, is figuring out what's related to where and what actually the field is called. That's a big one, especially when it comes to renaming of things. Inside of the report engine, you guys will find out shortly that is actually the database column name, not what you guys see, right? So like he was saying, you guys renamed our streets field to say route. So inside the report engine, you call out the streets field. You're not calling out route. So being able to know that type of thing is going to be huge. So the publish loading screen is now gone, and you can see at the very top it says last published at 1:06 p.m. So we're all good. Everything's fine. If that was all I had to do, I could set my system access to full access.